since our baby was born. Let's have a baby shower. Since this is your first grandchild, please be generous with the gift money. Feeling proud, I handed her an envelope with some money inside, only to get a sharp response. Only $300? That's an insult. That won't even cover the diapers. I was shocked. She turned pale and started shaking. My name is Olivia. I'm 57 years old, and I work in an office. My husband, John, owns an auto repair shop, which he runs with our son-in-law, Mason. Mason married our oldest daughter, Ava. They specialize in fixing luxury cars, and their business is doing very well because there's a high demand for repairs and inspections from luxury car dealerships. Mason often says, "You're really good at business. I need to learn from you and work harder." Mason and Ava have been married for 5 years. Before that, Mason worked in an office job but loved cars. He got his mechanic certification and started working with John. Although we don't live with Ava and Mason, since Ava started working as a secretary at her husband's shop, we see them almost every day. Their house is close to ours, so I often visit, and the four of us spend time together. Mason is friendly and easy to talk to, and anyone would think he's our real son. We do have a biological son, but we rarely see him since he moved away for work. William, our son, is 2 years younger than Ava. He never showed interest in his father's shop. After finishing college, he got a regular office job. When he was younger, he used to say he wanted to take over the shop one day, but as he got older, he changed his mind. He said, "There's no way to make a living working at a repair shop these days. I don't want to be covered in grease either." John never really planned for William to take over the business, but when William said he didn't want to take over, John felt sad. He had hired several employees and was thinking about the future. When Mason joined the business, John felt relieved. He knew the business would be in good hands. Ava was surprised when Mason became John's apprentice, but she was happy too. I knew Mason loved cars, but I never expected him to take over the business. Since William never planned to, I guess it's okay. John's business is doing well, and that's why Ava often asks me if William is planning to take over the shop someday. Ava has reason to be concerned. William's wife, Emma, has a very blunt personality. William and Emma got married 2 years ago, and even the first time they came to our house, Emma made a strong impression. When she arrived with William, the first thing she said was, "This is a very blue-collar home, isn't it? Is this what self-employed people's homes are like?" My husband and I were so shocked by Emma's comment that we couldn't respond. Ava, who was also there, got really angry and immediately said, "Who do you think you are? What are you saying to your fiancé's parents?" But Emma stood her ground and replied, "I'm just expressing my true feelings. Please stop picking on me before we're even married." I tried to calm things down because it looked like the two women were about to argue, and I wanted to continue with the introduction to the marriage, but then William said, "Just because we're getting married doesn't mean we'll live here or depend on you." It seemed like William wasn't happy about Mason helping with his father's business and getting along so well with us. Ever since Ava and Mason married, William seemed to want to distance himself from us even more. Mason wasn't there that day out of consideration, but William made a sarcastic comment. "Ava's husband isn't here today, huh? I thought it would be embarrassing if he showed up all greasy and dirty like he usually does. I'm relieved he's not here." Even though William had said he wouldn't take over my husband's shop, I thought he might not be happy that Mason, who isn't a blood relative, would become the successor. Hearing William's words made me angry, and I snapped back. "Are you jealous of Mason? You were the one who said you wouldn't take over your father's shop." I raised my voice, but my usually calm husband stepped in and said, "Don't get so angry, everyone. Since William's fiancée is here to introduce herself, let's try to get along. This is supposed to be a happy occasion." I tried to calm down and keep quiet, but then Emma said, "I don't mind. I have no intention of getting along with you anyway." She spoke to us in a way that made it sound like she was looking down on us. Ava and I, who had just started to calm down because of my husband's words, got angry again. We gave Emma a stern look, but she seemed amused. "You common people are so quick to get angry," she said with a smile. "As someone from an upper-class family, I've never been angry before." She proudly boasted about being from an upper-class family. According to William, Emma's father is the director of a large company, which probably explains why she called us common folk. The thought of her becoming our daughter-in-law didn't sit well with us. Even my husband seemed to think that, given the situation, a pleasant greeting for the marriage was impossible, so he suggested to William and the others, "How about we wrap this up for today? This was just a meet and greet anyway." The two of them quickly left. After they were gone, Ava was still upset. What was with that woman? She fumed. She was boasting about being the daughter of an upper-class family. Just because her father is a company director, she can't get too full of herself. Even my husband, who had been trying to calm us down, seemed shocked and said, "William really has a tough person to marry. I'm worried about what's to come." He then told us about how Emma had been difficult during the wedding preparations the day before. Emma had come to our house and said, "Please make sure to wash yourselves and your hair clean since you work at a mechanic shop, future father-in-law, and make sure to wear a dress that won't embarrass you, future sister-in-law. You do realize you're an ugly sister-in-law, right? So at least make sure your appearance is decent." She said this in a rude tone. I was about to yell back at her in anger, but my husband responded calmly. "Understood. We'll make sure not to cause any trouble." Emma seemed surprised by this. She probably expected us to get angry, but she didn't know how to react to my husband's polite response and left looking dissatisfied. At the wedding the next day, Emma made more rude comments in front of our family. She said, "It's embarrassing for everyone to know your relatives, so please behave. And this area smells oily, it's all because of you." Mason, who was meeting Emma for the first time, looked surprised and said, "I'd heard rumors, but she's worse than I expected." Mason usually has long, unkempt hair and a beard, but that day he had cut his hair and wore a suit. Emma had no complaints about his appearance, but I secretly wished he had come in his usual work clothes, with his long hair and beard, just to see how Emma would react. After the wedding, we didn't hear from William at all. I said, "I wonder if William is doing okay." My husband replied, "No news probably means he's fine." I was worried too, but if we contact him, his wife might get angry. Let's wait for them to contact us. When they came for the marriage greeting, they had clearly said they didn't want to associate with us, so it felt awkward to reach out. 2 years passed without any contact from William, but Emma's behavior at the wedding still came up in conversations whenever my husband, Ava, Mason, and I had a meal together. Mason said, "I don't think Emma knew who I was. No one introduced me to her. She probably saw me as just some dirty relative." I laughed and replied, "It would have been funny if you had come in your usual work clothes with your messy hair and beard. She might have kicked you out." Everyone laughed heartily. At the wedding, the atmosphere had been so tense that no one introduced Mason to Emma. By the time they had the chance, it was too late. But now, Mason had fully blended into our family, and it felt like we had a wonderful son, even without William. Then, one day, a heavy snowfall caused cars to get stuck everywhere. My husband's shop was busy with customers asking for help to tow their cars. My husband and Mason had gone out to help a foreign car dealer, but when they came back, they both looked down. Ava, worried, asked Mason what was wrong, but he just said, "No, it's nothing." He acted like nothing had happened, so I didn't think much of it. A few days later, William and Emma suddenly showed up at our house. Emma was holding a baby in her arms. When I saw the baby, I couldn't help but smile. Ava, who was visiting, smiled too and said, "Emma, you had a baby." She reached out to touch the baby, but then recoiled, yelling, "Don't touch her with your dirty hands, the oil smell will rub off." Seeing the baby made me forget everything for a moment, but I realized, even as a mother, Emma still hadn't changed. The tension returned, and Emma said, "Now that our child is born, let's have a baby shower. Since it's your first grandchild, please be generous with the gift money." She spoke in her usual sarcastic tone. I quickly put $300 in an envelope and handed it to her. I hadn't planned for this, so I didn't have time to prepare more or ask what she wanted. I thought I could always give her more later. Emma immediately checked the envelope, saw the amount, and shouted, "Are you kidding me? Only $300? That's not even enough for diapers." Her loud reaction shocked me. My usually calm husband suddenly took the envelope back from Emma and said, "Don't disrespect us. The father of that child isn't William, is it?" His words left me completely confused. When my husband yelled, Mason, who had been in the back room, came in. He looked puzzled at first, but when he saw Emma, he was shocked. Emma, seeing Mason, looked startled and quickly tried to hide her face. My husband said to Emma, "Seeing Mason, does that jog your memory? You remember him from the luxury minivan, don't you? You were complaining to him during the snowstorm." Still confused, Ava, William, and I were all shocked. My husband added, "And by the way, tell the man you were with that if he's going to have an affair, he should at least do it when it's not snowing, or else he'll get caught." We were all confused, but hearing the word affair, William's face suddenly went stiff, and Ava and I exchanged looks of disbelief. Emma quickly denied everything. What are you talking about? The snowstorm? The affair? You're not making any sense. But she was flustered, clearly not acting like her usual self. At my husband's signal, Mason brought out his phone and showed Emma something on it. My husband explained. On the day of the snowstorm, Emma and a man got stuck in a luxury minivan, and Mason and I went to rescue them. I didn't recognize Emma at first, but it seemed strange that there was a baby in the car. I was wearing a mask, sunglasses, and a helmet, so she probably didn't recognize me, but Mason had long hair and a beard, so she must remember him. When my husband finished explaining, Mason said, "Everything is on our car's dash cam, so she can't deny it." Mason showed Emma the footage. She gasped when she saw it and quickly turned her face away. Ava, William, and I stared at the screen. On the video, Emma and a man we didn't recognize were complaining to Mason, saying, "We have a baby on board, moving already, you slacker." On the screen, Emma was yelling while my husband and Mason were putting chains on the expensive minivan. Emma and the unknown man were whispering to each other. My husband, looking angry, said, "The dash cam doesn't record sound, but I heard everything. William is such a fool for believing the child is his." Then he turned to Emma and said, "Well, Emma, you're the fool for talking about your affair right in front of your father-in-law without even realizing it." As my husband spoke, Ava asked, "What are you saying? Is all of this true? Tell me." William suddenly yelled. Emma stammered and said, "Of course, it's a lie," but her pale face said otherwise. Mason added, "Didn't you say you divorced William at the right time? I clearly heard you. You also said you'd make sure to get child support, and you sounded happy about it." Emma's face turned even more anxious. She began shaking as she held the baby, and the baby started crying. Emma quickly pointed at us, saying, "Look what you did. The baby's crying because you're all mean to me." Then, she said, "Enough is enough, I'm going home today," and stormed out, leaving William behind. William's face turned red with anger, but once Emma left, he calmed down a bit. He looked at his father and asked, "Is what you said earlier true?" His father nodded silently. Mason explained further. "Emma's lover is the president of a company that works with our shop. I heard from some dealers that Emma went with him when he came to buy a car. Apparently, they bought the minivan because they were having a baby." William buried his face in his hands, and then crouched down, overwhelmed. Later, a DNA test confirmed the child was not William's. William immediately filed for divorce. Emma, on the other hand, later said, "Marrying a commoner like him was my mistake." Emma yelled defiantly, but the DNA test results showed that the child's father was not the president, another man was the father. This caused even more confusion. It turned out that Emma had cheated with another man, and the child was his, though this man was married. William sought compensation in the divorce and also demanded compensation from both of Emma's lovers. Emma's family, who had always boasted about their high-class background, turned out not to be that wealthy. They had to borrow money to pay the divorce compensation. The reason Emma had the affair with the president was because she wanted to live a high-class lifestyle, but her plan didn't work out. She didn't remarry the president. Instead, he sued her for breach of engagement. After splitting up with Emma, William became distrustful of women. He declared, "I'll never get married again," and started living alone. For my husband and me, our first grandchild turned out to be a fantasy. However, we soon found out that Ava was expecting a baby, and we were thrilled. Mason jokingly said to my husband, "Rest assured, the baby is definitely mine." When the baby arrives, we plan to live together with Ava and Mason. It looks like our life is going to be lively and full of joy.
Checking my phone, I noticed there were 13 missed calls, all from my mother-in-law. Not again. Just as this thought crossed my mind, my phone vibrated again. "Hello," I answered, and my mother-in-law shouted loudly, "Brittany, where is this month's $33,000 support money?" "What I'm talking about, the $3,000 for this month hasn't been transferred yet." Her voice dripped with anger, never considering our situation. My patience reached its limit. She never reflected on her words or actions, even in this state. It was time for the last resort. I told my mother-in-law on the other end of the phone, "Your son has passed away, so I can no longer provide support. I am Brittany Wagner, a 32-year-old part-time housewife working at a major financial company. I married about 2 years ago, meeting my husband Justin through a shared hobby. His kindness and wonderful smile captivated me, and after a year of dating, we got engaged. We believed we couldn't find better partners than each other. Everything went smoothly until we faced a problem: my mother-in-law. My father-in-law had passed away years ago, and with no siblings, the only family left was my mother-in-law. Trouble started when we visited her to announce our engagement. As I greeted her, Sandra, my mother-in-law, showed her displeasure. "Are you Justin's fiancé?" "Yes, I am. My name is Brittany Wagner. Nice to meet you." You seem rather plain. I wonder what Justin sees in you. It's curious." I couldn't tell if she was serious or joking. Shocked, I heard such words from the mother of the man I loved. Seeing my distress, Justin looked displeased with his mother. "Wait, Mom, why would you say something like that all of a sudden? Why can you so casually say such awful things about the person I brought? It's different. I just want to choose the right woman for you. I brought her here because I've decided to marry her. It's not up to you to comment on my choice, Destin. You don't have to be so cold. I'm just thinking about what's best for you." The argument between mother and son unfolded, creating a tense atmosphere. As it was my first meeting with my mother-in-law, I couldn't intervene. The uncomfortable air lingered even after the argument, but ultimately, we conveyed our intention to marry. As we left, Sandra spoke to Justin in a somewhat disgruntled tone. "Hey, Justin, you'll keep that promise even after we get married, right?" "Huh? What promise?" "You know about the promise of financial support." "Ah, that. I will continue to do it as always. Please don't bring this up in front of Brittany." The atmosphere between my husband and his mother had been tense for a while, making the air feel heavy. On the way back in the car, I asked Justin about something that had been on my mind. "Hey, Justin, about what you and your mother were discussing when we were leaving." "Ah, yeah. I suppose I should discuss something with you. I heard about financial support, and since my dad passed away, I've been sending money to my mom every month." "How much are you sending?" $2,000 each month." "What? $2,000? I raised my voice unconsciously, shocked by the amount. Justin sighed deeply and began to speak slowly. "Actually, my mom is in debt." "Debt?" "Yeah, she got into debt from gambling in the past. She's been paying it off and living on that, but her legs aren't in good shape anymore. So she spends more time at home now, and she still needs money to live, right?" "Well, yes, but I still think $2,000 is too much." "I know, but if I even slightly reduce the amount, she keeps calling me persistently." "Well, a parent is still a parent, you know. I worry about her since we can't live together." "I see. Justin is incredibly caring towards his mother, but it can't be helped. Since his father passed away, his mother is the only family he has left. No matter what her character is like, she's still an important mother to Justin. At that time, all I could think was what a kind person my husband was. Then, one day, 2 months after we got married, during my lunch break, I received a call on my smartphone. It was from my mother-in-law. "Hello?" "Yes," I answered, and she began speaking in a cheerful tone. "It's been a while, Brittany. I have something to discuss. Are you free now?" "Yes, I'm free. What's going on?" "Well, I was thinking maybe you could also start sending me some financial support." I was speechless at her unexpected request, but my mother-in-law continued happily. "You mentioned you work at a financial company, right? So you must have a good salary." "No, that's not the case. Are you trying to lie to me because you don't want to give me money?" "That's not what I'm saying." "Then why not?" "But Mother, Justin is still sending you money every month, isn't he?" "Yes, he is." She didn't seem to appreciate the support she was already receiving. I spoke up firmly. "Please listen calmly, mother-in-law. Continuing to send as much as $2,000 a month is a really big deal, you know? And yet, you still want more. I can't understand that." "Oh, is that so? You say that. But if you could just contribute the remaining $1,000, Justin wouldn't be burdened." "What do you mean by that?" I have Justin as a co-signer on my debt, which means if I default on my payments, the creditors will come after him. Do you understand what I'm saying? What? But wasn't the $2,000 Justin sends used for paying off the debt? Well, the thing is, it's not enough. I haven't told Justin yet, but the debt is quite substantial. It seemed from the way my mother-in-law spoke that this was a truth unknown to my husband. If we were to have children in the future, it would inevitably mean more expenses. On top of that, paying off my mother-in-law's debt wouldn't be easy. However, if her repayments fell behind by the time the debt transferred to Justin, the interest would likely have ballooned significantly. It was easy to foresee that refusing to help now would ultimately burden my husband. Realizing that, the best course might be to ensure she pays off her debt completely. I hesitantly conveyed to my mother-in-law, "I understood. I'll contribute to the support as well." "Really, Brittany? You're amazing. I knew you would say that. Combined with Justin's, it'll be $3,000 a month. This will be used to properly pay off the debt, right?" "Of course. I plan to pay off the entire amount in about a year. Please promise to pay it off without any delay." "Okay, I understand. It's a promise. So I'll be expecting the support starting from this month," my mother-in-law said, unilaterally ending the call. The stress piled onto my exhausted body, and I felt increasingly depressed. $1,000 every month, that's a significant burden, but it's necessary to prevent future troubles for us as a couple. And if my mother-in-law can't live properly, Justin wouldn't like that either. That evening, I promptly reported this to my husband. He said, "You shouldn't have to go through all this trouble." But I had already agreed with my mother-in-law. I explained it was a tough decision made to avoid future burdens on us. With a look of regret, my husband said, "I'm really sorry, but thank you," showing understanding for my decision. Time passed, and 2 years have gone by since this decision. The support, which was supposed to end in a year, is still ongoing, and we continue to transfer $3,000 to my mother-in-law every month. To complicate matters, my husband fell ill about 2 months ago and has been unable to work. He's on sick leave and receiving a small amount of sickness allowance, but it's minuscule compared to his usual salary. Last month, I used my savings to send the $3,000 to my mother-in-law. But if this continues, even our living expenses will become difficult. Incredibly, my mother-in-law hasn't once visited Justin in the hospital. I informed her a long time ago about his hospitalization, but instead of visiting, she only contacts me to ensure the continuation of the support. Frustrated by her behavior, I finally brought up the subject with my husband. "Justin, your mother only talks about money. Even knowing you're hospitalized, we need to seriously consider whether to continue the support." "Yeah, I've been thinking the same. I don't want to burden Brittany any further. She's been calling and messaging this month asking, is the support coming?" Seriously, even though her own son is in the hospital, all she thinks about is money. Justin, looking somewhat gaunt, expressed his anger towards his mother. Then, with a sudden idea, he said, "Ah, I've got it," and smiled. "What is it, Justin?" "Well, I just thought of something. It's a last resort, though. Something good." "About my mother?" "Huh, what?" My husband proposed an unexpected plan. It might seem excessive, but it seemed the only way to get through to my mother-in-law in her current state. A few weeks later, Justin was discharged from the hospital, fortunately in good health. Since there was no response from my mother-in-law despite numerous attempts to contact her, we hadn't informed her of my husband's discharge date. For the past 2 weeks or so, she had been incessantly demanding financial support. There's no need to purposely send money to a mother who doesn't even worry about her son. My husband remarked while having coffee. As we relaxed, a message came to my smartphone. On closer inspection, there were 13 missed calls from my mother-in-law. Not again. As my phone vibrated again, it was another call from my mother-in-law. I deliberately turned on the speaker so that my husband could hear, and my mother-in-law immediately started shouting, "Brittany, where's this month's $3,000 support? What I'm talking about, the $3,000 for this month hasn't been transferred yet. Mother, please calm down. Do you realize right now Justin is? I don't care if he's sick or whatever. You work at a good company. You must have plenty of savings. Hurry up and transfer it to me. My mother-in-law furiously shouted, eventually saying something unbelievable. Do you get it? You married Justin and became his wife, so when Justin can't pay because he's sick, you should pay me. If you don't, I'll make you the co-signer of the debt. At that moment, something inside me snapped. She always exposed her greed, never considering our situation. My patience with her had reached its limit. Doesn't she reflect on her words or actions even in this situation? If that's the case, I have no choice but to play my last card. I firmly told my mother-in-law over the phone, your son has passed away, so I can no longer provide support. My mother-in-law responded with a dumbfounded, "Huh." Justin's proposed last resort was to lie to my mother-in-law that my husband had died and see her reaction. If she showed even a hint of sadness, reflected on her past behavior, and sincerely apologized, then I would consider continuing the support. But if she showed no remorse and still demanded money, I was ready to completely sever ties. I thought even a mother obsessed with money would deeply reflect upon hearing about her son's death. However, the moment she heard it, my mother-in-law started laughing loudly. Ha ha ha. What's so funny? Because if Justin is dead, that means I'll get a share of the inheritance, right? I've been researching it, you know. I started looking into it as soon as I heard Justin got sick. You're entitled to 2/3 of Justin's estate, and the remaining 1/3 is mine. I was dumbfounded. Normally, if one hears their child is sick, they would first look for treatment or useful information. But she had been researching inheritance division. My anger reached its limit, and I was beyond appalled. My husband seemed to feel the same way, and we exchanged glances before he slowly nodded. It was a sign to continue with the plan. Once again, I spoke firmly to my mother-in-law. Mother, did you listen to what I said? Your son Justin has passed away. I've heard you, so what? Aren't you sad your son has died before you? Oh, right. I was worried I wouldn't get the monthly support anymore. But well, if I'm getting the inheritance, that's fine. How can you, for now, just make sure you give me 1/3 of the inheritance, okay? If you try to run off with it all by yourself, I'll never forgive you. The call ended abruptly, and the dial tone echoed in my ears. Casually glancing at my husband, I saw his face turn red with anger, his body shaking. Justin, calm down. Are you okay? As I casually asked my husband, he looked me straight in the eyes and said, I've decided I should cut ties with such a person. She will surely come here demanding money eventually, so let's wait until then. Yeah, you're right, Justin. Are you really okay with this, cutting ties with your mother like this? Yeah, I am. After hearing what she said on the phone, I have no regrets. Someone who can say such things without batting an eye is not a parent. His eyes were filled with hatred, turning red. I felt the same way. A person who thinks only about money, even over her son's life, is not family. A few days later, as expected, my mother-in-law showed up at our house. I managed the situation for the time being and asked Justin to hide in the next room. Then, my mother-in-law approached me with a fierce look and pressed me aggressively. Brittany, hand over Justin's inheritance right now. Huh? That topic again? Don't you have anything else to say? Justin's dead, isn't he? What's the point of saying anything now? It's meaningless. You have the nerve to say that when you didn't even visit him in the hospital. Can you even call yourself his parent? You're so noisy. Just give me the inheritance right now. I'll call a lawyer if I have to. At that moment, I realized that talking to her was just a waste of time. Just then, my husband emerged from the next room. Seeing him, my mother-in-law let out a loud gasp as if she'd seen a ghost. Justin, why? You're supposed to be dead. Mom, long time no see. Sorry, but the story about me being dead was a lie. A lie, you say? Why would you say such a disrespectful thing? to expose your true nature and confirm it for myself. I wondered how you would manage the monthly financial support if I, your son, were dead. But unfortunately, you turned out to be the worst kind of person, only thinking about money. This situation made that very clear. That's Justin, calling your own parents the worst kind of person. Quiet? I'm cutting ties with a toxic parent like you. As my husband shouted, Sandra stood there open-mouthed, stunned. She hadn't yet come to terms with the reality of being disowned by her own son. Wait, what do you mean, Justin? Well, I just said, I'm cutting ties. I can't consider someone like you my mother. Don't say that. So, what about the financial support? Why would I support you? You need to find a way to pay off your own debt. We've decided to move away. Wait, without the support, I won't be able to live. Tears in her eyes, my mother-in-law reached out to my husband. He forcefully brushed her hand away, looked at her coldly, and said, I don't care about your life. You never once apologized for all the trouble you caused us, did you? Knowing your true nature now, I feel relieved. Don't ever show your face to us again. That's cruel. Wait, Justin, are you really going to abandon your mother? Ignoring her words, my husband grabbed her arm and dragged her to the front door. Then he threw her bag and shoes outside and kicked her out of the house. She made a scene outside, but apparently unable to bear the stares of onlookers, she left after a while. Persistent calls and emails came, but we ignored them all. We blocked her number and quickly finished moving. The co-signing of the debt turned out to be something Sandra had fabricated, so the guarantee contract was void, and Justin no longer had any responsibility as a guarantor. Having lost all support from us, my mother-in-law was apparently living a miserable life. It was no surprise since she had used almost all the money we sent for gambling. The remaining debt was substantial, and she spent her days being chased by debt collectors. Working from morning till night, she couldn't gamble anymore. It's unlikely that she will pay off all her debt anytime soon. From now on, she will have to work until her body can no longer move. It's all her own doing. Meanwhile, we are living fulfilling days in our new home. Justin's condition stabilized, and he was able to return to work after recovering. And now there's a new life growing inside me. Next year, our family will grow by one, and we will start a new life. In the future, we want to spend peaceful and happy days as a family of 3. People like you, with no job and a limited education, are not welcome in this household. With those words, my mother-in-law poured scalding water on me. It's hot, please stop. I involuntarily screamed, shocked by her bizarre behavior. Pouring boiling water on anyone is inexcusable. Fortunately, I suffered no burns, but it could have been a disaster. I couldn't believe my mother-in-law would resort to such extremes. Moreover, it wasn't me but my husband who was unemployed. A growing anger towards my mother-in-law's attitude surged within me. Enough is enough. If she's gone this far, I'll do as she wishes. Understood. If you insist, I have no choice. I'll leave this house, I declared. Finally, you're leaving. That makes things easier for me. My mother-in-law expressed joy, far from being remorseful. I no longer wanted to stay in such a hostile environment. I promptly packed my things and returned to my parents' home. My mother-in-law didn't know that my husband, Raphael, was unemployed or that I had been supporting the household finances. In fact, since quitting my job, I had started trading stocks and was earning about $30,000 a month. Even if I was driven out of her house, I could still live on my own without any issues. I wouldn't have any qualms being on my own. Even if she came to me in tears, struggling with living expenses, I would never lend a hand. She should regret kicking me out like this. I had married Raphael about 2 years ago. We were from the same university and had been dating since then. Both of us, graduates of the economics department, aspired to work in finance, and managed to secure jobs at different brokerage companies after graduation. Despite our busy days, we maintained our relationship. 3 years later, Raffle proposed. "Julia, I will definitely make you happy. Marry me." Believing that I could be happy with Raffle, I accepted. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. We decided to get married, thinking we could build a happy family together. However, Raffle then dropped an unexpected bomb. "Hey Julia, would you quit your job and live with me at my parents' house?" "What? I don't mind quitting my job, but we're newlyweds. I'd like to live with just the two of us. I'm just worried about leaving my mother alone. I'll make sure it won't be a burden to you." Raffle's father had passed away when he was in middle school, and since then, he had lived with his mother. Being an only child, Raffle was concerned about her. Understanding his feelings, I agreed. "Okay, I'll live with you." 2 weeks later, we moved into Raffle's family home. My mother-in-law, now able to live with Raffle, initially greeted us with a pleased expression. However, as soon as she looked at me, her expression clouded. She stared at me coldly, making it painfully clear that I was not welcomed. "It doesn't matter. You didn't have to come here." What did I mishear? I thought I heard my mother-in-law muttering something under her breath, but I couldn't make it out clearly. I smiled and brushed it off. At this point, I began to feel a bit anxious about living with her. However, the day passed without any particular issues. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my mother-in-law yelling at me. "Are you still sleeping? Hurry up and prepare breakfast." When I looked at the clock by my bed, it was still before dawn, around 4:00 a.m., and it was still dark outside. I was surprised that she would demand breakfast so early. Why so early? "Don't just laze around because you're not working." My mother-in-law scolded me, still groggy from sleep. I thought it was way too early in the morning, but I couldn't argue back and started preparing breakfast. Even while preparing breakfast, my mother-in-law kept berating me. "Hurry up! Why does it take you so long? You're so slow." After 30 minutes, breakfast was finally ready. "I'm sorry for making you wait. You finally finished. Can't you make it faster?" My mother-in-law complained again. I wanted to retort that it was physically impossible to do it any faster, but I just smiled and shrugged it off. "What is this? This soup is too salty. What is it?" "I don't think it's that salty. What are you saying? There's something wrong with my taste? Are you trying to kill me quickly by feeding me such salty meals? I never thought or intended such a thing. What is she talking about, and why is she so harsh on me?" Curious, I mustered the courage to ask my mother-in-law. "Why are you so harsh on me? What are you talking about? I don't think I'm being harsh. Or are you trying to make me the bad guy?" "No, that's not what I mean." I was overwhelmed by my mother-in-law's pressure and couldn't talk back. Finish eating. Start cleaning. After that, there's laundry to do, so there's no time to rest. Since then, every day, I was continually harassed by my mother-in-law, wearing me down both mentally and physically. While I was cleaning, she would say things like, "You missed the dust in the corner." When I was doing laundry, she'd complain, "There's still a stain." A month after starting to live with her, I felt like I was going to break. So I talked to Raphael about it. "It's about your mother. She's been saying mean things to me every day, and it's hard. Could you please tell her not to say such things?" But Raphael showed no reaction. I was momentarily irritated by Raphael's lack of response. But then I noticed something strange about him. He was pale, as if he had something important to say. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" When I asked, Raphael hesitantly began to speak. "Actually, I've been fired from the company." "What is this? Some kind of joke?" I was speechless, unable to comprehend. There was a downsizing at the company, and I got laid off, according to Raphael. Due to recent economic downturns, the company's profits had plummeted, leading to unavoidable large-scale layoffs. "So you'll be unemployed from tomorrow." "Well, I can work for 1 more month after receiving the notice of dismissal. But after that..." Fortunately, I had been using my knowledge from my time at the securities company to trade stocks. Although I struggled at first, I was now earning about $30,000 a month, so we weren't struggling financially. I was comforting Raphael and had forgotten about all the harassment from my mother-in-law. From the next day onwards, I endured my mother-in-law's harsh treatments as Raphael lost his job. Feeling the need to be strong and support him, I continued to endure the situation. A month passed, and Raphael was officially laid off and became unemployed. He started looking for a job initially, but gradually he began to spend most of his time at home, making excuses. "Shouldn't you start looking for a job more seriously?" I suggested. "Yeah, I'm looking, but it's hard to find a good company that will suit me," Raphael replied, seemingly having no intention of actively seeking new employment. Reluctantly, I continued to support our household. As time passed, the harassment from my mother-in-law intensified, and I grew increasingly exhausted. Initially, I thought I had to endure it because Raphael was unemployed, but I no longer felt that way. I spent my days feeling listless. One day, Raphael unusually went out in the morning. Perhaps he had finally started to seriously look for a job. After seeing him off, I started cleaning as usual. "Make sure it's clean. Do it properly." My mother-in-law sipped coffee on the living room sofa, hurling sarcasm at me. Fed up, I ignored her. Suddenly, she threw a tantrum and yelled at me. "How dare you ignore me? You're just a mere daughter-in-law. You don't even have a job." Ignoring her, I continued cleaning. She grew angrier and confronted me. "Still ignoring me? Unemployed and uneducated people like you should leave this house." She yelled and then poured boiling water on me, the hot water she had prepared for her coffee. "It's hot? Please stop." I screamed involuntarily at her sudden action. Thankfully, the water wasn't super boiling hot, so I didn't suffer any burns, but it could have been a disaster. Finally reacting, she said, "This is what I've been saying. If you're not working, leave this house." She smirked as she spoke. Fed up with her behavior, I had no choice but to agree to her demand. "All right, I'll leave." "Good. That makes things easier. Leave quickly." I quickly packed my things and decided to leave that day. I no longer wanted to spend another second in that house. I left, heading straight to my parents' home. Upon arrival, my parents were surprised by the sudden visit, but welcomed me warmly. I waited for a call from Raphael, but there was neither a phone call nor a message. Feeling a bit lonely, I decided not to contact him until he reached out. A month passed since I returned to my parents' house, but there was still no contact from Raphael. My feelings for him faded, and I started considering divorce. One early morning, the doorbell at my parents' house rang. On the monitor, I saw, to my surprise, Raphael and my mother-in-law. "What now, after all this time?" I thought. "Yes, what can I do for you?" "I've forgiven you. Now come back home quickly," she yelled through the intercom as usual. Forgiving me? What's she talking about? I appreciated her words, but I hadn't done anything that required forgiveness from her. After telling her that, I ended the intercom call, boiling with anger at my mother-in-law's attitude. However, they were persistent, banging on the front door violently. "Don't just hang up on me. Come on, let's go back," my mother-in-law yelled. Considering the noise they were making could become a hassle to the neighborhood, I reluctantly opened the door, inviting my mother-in-law and Raphael inside after seating them on the sofa in the living room. I inquired about their unexpected visit, wondering why they were both there all of a sudden. It was my mother-in-law who had insisted that I leave, and now she was telling me to come back. The situation was perplexing, and I couldn't make any sense of it. "You're the one who told me to leave. There's no way I can go back now," I asserted. My mother-in-law responded with frustration, accusing me of childish behavior and claiming to have forgiven me. She insisted that I return and stay in her house, even stating that she'd let me, an unemployed and uneducated person, stay there. But I'm not the unemployed one, it's Raphael. And if I go back, they'll take advantage of me every day. I might not be working, but what about your son, huh? I retorted. Raffle seemed surprised at this revelation. My mother-in-law appeared confused, indicating that Raffle hadn't informed her about his layoff. Pressed further, Raffle finally admitted to being laid off from the company. Apologies and explanations ensued, with Raffle justifying his actions by relying on my income for financial stability. My mother-in-law, shocked at the news, openly expressed anger toward Raffle for not finding a job yet. "Why did you keep quiet about this? What are we going to do now?" she scolded him. Raffle assured her that my income would suffice for the time being, causing my mother-in-law to label him as worthless for not actively seeking employment. Fed up with Raffle's excuses, I couldn't believe that I had ever thought of supporting him. When my mother-in-law suggested I come back, I vehemently rejected the idea, considering all the mistreatment I had endured. Their unexpected visit had turned into a heated argument, revealing the truth about my mother-in-law pouring boiling water on me. Raffle was shocked to learn about this incident and confronted his mother. "Why did you do that?" he asked her. She admitted to the act, attributing it to my ignoring her. The revelation sparked a heated exchange between Raphael and his mother, prompting me to intervene and urge them to take their arguments home. Realizing the impact of their loud arguments on someone else's house, my words prompted a change in their attitudes. Previously assertive and bold, they now pleaded with me to come back, promising that they wouldn't cause any harm again. Despite their pleas, I saw through their intentions. Raffle's promise to find a job seemed insincere, and my mother-in-law's assurance not to cause trouble appeared dubious. I voiced my skepticism, stating that their words were pointless and that they would only take advantage of me. Their silence confirmed my suspicions, and I left them in the living room, heading to my room, leaving them to contemplate their actions. When I returned to the living room 5 minutes later, they were still sitting in silence with their heads down. Frustrated by the prolonged silence, I questioned, "How long do you plan to stay quiet? It doesn't matter to me anymore." Instead of a response, Raffle signed something. I had handed him a pre-filled divorce form with my name on it. Surprised by the document, Raffle looked utterly confused. I bluntly explained, "Can't you see it's a divorce form? I'm done with someone who won't find a job and didn't even contact me after I went back to my parents' house." "Do wait, please. This is too sudden," Raffle protested. I found his stubbornness irritating, as he seemed oblivious to the fact that his actions were the root cause of our problems. Unmoved, I affirmed, "I've made up my mind. My decision to divorce you won't change, no matter what you say." Raffle, still in disbelief, questioned if divorce was too harsh. Coldly, I responded, "I don't think so. It's your fault." I directed the same coldness toward my mother-in-law, who was partly to blame. Resigned to the situation, Raffle signed the divorce form, warning me not to regret it. However, I felt a sense of relief, and I asserted that the one who might regret it was Raffle. "I'll submit the divorce form. I don't want any compensation. Just go home," I declared, finalizing my divorce from Raffle. Though it may have seemed harsh, it was necessary to escape the harassment from my mother-in-law and Raffle's unemployment. 2 weeks later, while relaxing at my parents' house, I received a call from my ex-mother-in-law. She informed me that the electricity and gas had been cut off and questioned if I had done something. I explained that I had stopped paying for Raffle and her living expenses. Hoping for my assistance, she asked if I could cover it just for the month. I found her request absurd, considering we were no longer a couple and didn't live together. I firmly declined, suggesting she ask Raffle for help, as he had promised to find a job. Unable to comprehend my refusal, she pleaded for help, playing the ex-wife card. However, I remained firm, ending the call and blocking her number. Finally, I severed ties with both my ex-mother-in-law, who constantly harassed me, and Raffle, who had proven to be unreliable. Life at my parents' house became peaceful, and I focused on rebuilding my life. Months later, while checking stock charts on a holiday, I received a message from Raffle. He apologized for everything, acknowledging his reliance on me and the recent job at a factory. Despite the apology, I had no intention of getting involved with them again. Raphael mentioned his mother's continued harshness and expressed a desire for me to come back. Reading the message, I believed reconciliation was unlikely. I blocked Raphael's number. 6 months after the divorce, I started dating a man introduced by a friend. He was reliable, treated me well, and despite the age difference, we connected. While marriage was not on the immediate horizon, I cherished the happy times we spent together, focusing on the present and leaving the past behind. Oh, isn't this exquisite? It's not just lovely, it's a pink diamond, and it comes with a price tag of $50,000. My mother-in-law, who couldn't be bothered to attend my own mother's funeral, appears to be relishing a lavish getaway with her friends, completely oblivious to my presence. She gleefully shared details about her new sparkling pink diamond ring, seemingly fueled by jealousy towards a friend who flaunted a similar ring. In her triumph, she revels in having outdone her friend by choosing a more expensive ring from the same store. However, the reality is far from what it seems. It's implausible for her to afford such a costly item. And it turns out she had secretly taken money from my husband's safe to make the purchase. This money, crucial for her future, had been earmarked for her nursing home fees. My name is Hillary Johnson, a 46-year-old woman living with my husband Steve, who is 7 years my senior, and our high school senior daughter Gina. Despite not being wealthy, we lead a stable life. I have worked part-time at a local drugstore for over a decade, and my hobby is cultivating herbs. Lately, I've been challenging myself with a medical herb certification exam. Gina and I often discuss her future dreams, bringing us joy. 6 months ago, my father-in-law passed away, introducing significant changes to our modest lifestyle. According to his will, the house went to Steve, and the cash to my mother-in-law. The money was intended for her nursing home fees, given her age of 75. Despite this, she pleaded tearfully to live in the house, and after much debate, we agreed to cohabitate for a year while searching for a suitable home. The area where the family home is situated has now become a popular high-end residential area. Still, we are not wealthy. It's an old landholding. I learned that my mother-in-law had a habit of spending recklessly, and though I had prepared for it to some extent, the reality was shocking. As Steve heads out for dinner shopping, my mother-in-law, on the first day of our cohabitation, casually asks, "Hillary, could you lend me some money? I'm going out." "Thank you. Just in case something comes up, and I need more, give me $100 for now," she says under the pretext of buying dinner. I found myself pondering how much groceries she intended to purchase. Despite my reservations, I made the mistake of giving her the requested amount. 2 hours later, she returned by taxi, laden with bags from an upscale department store filled with expensive deli items and sweets. Tonight, we feast. I wanted to try these side dishes. They're supposed to be delicious, and we have desserts too, she exclaimed proudly. Curious, I asked, "Mother, how much did this cost?" She replied, "Well, let's see. I went a bit over because of the taxi, but I covered the extra, so it's fine." Her proud declaration left me speechless, but little did I know this was just the beginning. Managing finances became my biggest headache after moving to the family home. While my father-in-law was alive, we used online supermarkets for groceries, paying with his card. Learning from my initial mistake of giving her large sums of money, I no longer entrusted her with shopping and kept the wallet in a locked drawer. Unhappy with not receiving money, she stopped doing any housework, caring only for the flowers at the entrance. Despite our monthly allowance of $300, she squandered it on clothes, beauty salons, meals, or coffee with neighbors. By mid-month, she would usually run out of money and ask for more. Frustrated by her reckless spending, as I was saving for my daughter's education, I calmly admonished her when she requested more money for a lunch date with friends. Even Steve, who works, gets an allowance of $300. I can't give you more than someone who's working, so please use it more wisely." Dissatisfied, she returned to her room, likely to ask Steve for money later. The allowance came from the nursing home fund, and if it diminished, it would be her who suffered. When Steve came home, I expressed my concerns. "Did your mother ask you for more allowance again?" He replied, "Yes, she did. But I can't be too hard on her. She must be lonely without Dad. She's always been vain, you know. But I want to fulfill her wishes for at least this year that she's here." "I understand, but your kindness isn't truly benefiting her. Besides, it will eventually have repercussions for us." "You're right. I get it. My mother-in-law had a tendency to flaunt, especially in front of her 3 old friends who were mothers of my husband's classmates living in the neighborhood. I became aware of this during the funeral arrangements for my father-in-law. Steve, it's your father's funeral, so arrange the altar this way and get more extravagant flowers. The neighbors are coming. Don't embarrass your father," she instructed. Steve, being the spouse, complied with her demands to some extent, but the costs were significantly high. My mother-in-law's primary aim was to show off to the neighbors. I even felt sympathy for her, having to keep up with people from a different lifestyle. During the funeral, she only greeted 3 families of her friends. One day, after having lunch with her friends, she came back excited, her eyes sparkling. Today, Debbie showed me a ring worth $20,000 that she got from her husband for their golden wedding anniversary. I've never seen a $20,000 ring before. That's a wonderful gift. You don't have such wealthy friends, do you, Hillary? You'll probably never see anything like that in your life, she remarked with superiority and sarcasm, using her friends to boast. Hillary, you're so plain. Why don't you put on some makeup? Have you ever been to an upscale lunch? It was all about one-upping me. I tried to ignore her words, but she seemed increasingly hostile towards me, especially after I refused to give her more money. After settling my father-in-law's affairs and starting to look for a nursing home, my mother's health took a turn for the worse. When my sister and I rushed to the hospital, the doctor informed us that she had about 3 months to live due to advanced cancer. She was in a fragile state and could deteriorate at any time. My mother had occasionally mentioned feeling unwell before, but being a person of great endurance, it wasn't easy for her to show any signs of weakness. I regretted not paying more attention to her. I asked my sister to stay with her while I went to fetch some clothes and valuables from her apartment. As I packed a large bag in her room, I found some cash, likely her living expenses for the month, in a drawer. I took the cash with me, planning to shower and head back to the hospital. I left the bag in Steve's upstairs room and, after getting ready, noticed the zipper slightly open. A sense of unease washed over me as I checked the bag and found the cash missing. Suppressing my rising anger, I went downstairs to my mother-in-law's room. "Mother, may I ask you something?" I inquired as she prepared to leave. Turning around, she asked, "How's your mother doing? I have plans with my friends right now." I confronted her. "The money that was in the bag in our room, you have it, don't you? That money belongs to my mother. Please return it." "I don't know what you're talking about. I never go upstairs." "Are you accusing me of stealing?" she retorted, rushing past me and heading for the door. "I'm going out for a fancy Chinese dinner with my friends tonight, so I don't need your poor excuse for a meal. Give my regards to your mother." With a smirk on her face, she left the house, leaving me in shock. Just then, Jenna came home and asked, "Mom, are you okay?" "Your grandmother's money. My mother-in-law took it." Unable to confront her without evidence, tears naturally started to fall from my eyes. Jenna gently stroked my back to calm me down. "That's terrible. It must have been her. I've seen her coming down from upstairs before. To think she would stoop to taking your grandmother's money. I can't forgive her. But how's Grandma? If you're going to the hospital, I'll come with you. Let's think of a way to get back at her." As we walked, Jenna's words encouraged me, lightening my heart a bit. Despite feeling sorry for my father-in-law, I decided to protect my family in my own way. A few days later, my mother's condition suddenly worsened, and she passed away. In her final days, she was mostly in a daze, occasionally lucid. I expressed my gratitude to her repeatedly for raising me, for her love, for Gina's future dreams, for the plans with Steve, and for our old age. She didn't speak, but her eyes smiled gently and sometimes nodded. While talking to her, I remembered a visit to my father-in-law before his death. He had thought about divorcing my mother-in-law, but didn't want to trouble his son and his wife. He asked me to sell the house and put my mother-in-law in a nursing home after his death. That's when he told me about her spending habits. Her attitude changed when Steve started kindergarten, living in a wealthy area, feeling pressure to keep up with rich neighbors. She deluded herself into thinking she was wealthy too, possibly fueled by Steve's success in a famous company. I regretted not putting her in a nursing home sooner. It could have prevented the theft of my mother's money. Steve and Gina arrived in time for my mother's final moments, but only my sister and her husband were there at the end. When we returned home to prepare for the funeral, my mother-in-law was out. I decided to show her the last bit of kindness. We held a small funeral for my mother without her presence. I tried calling her, but she was out and never answered. When I returned home after the funeral, everything was quiet as if she had stayed out overnight. Then, my mother-in-law returned in a good mood. "My condolences for your loss. It must have been hard," she greeted me. I noticed a shiny new jewel in her hand that I had never seen before. "Elvis, look, isn't it beautiful?" "A pink diamond. It cost $50,000. How did you get that, Mother?" I asked. She replied, "I bought it, of course." Debbie introduced me to the store. It's a reservation-only place in New York City, so I went for an overnight stay with my friends. The hotel we stayed at, and the meals were wonderful. To my astonishment, my mother-in-law indulged in luxuries during my mother's funeral, enjoying an overnight trip to New York with friends. I was left speechless with disbelief. I bought something even more expensive than what Debbie showed me. "Feels good, Mother," my mother-in-law declared. I couldn't comprehend how she obtained such an expensive item. "You don't have that kind of money. How did you get it?" I questioned. Nonchalantly, she replied, "Oh, I found it in Steve's room safe. My passbook was in there with exactly $50,000. Since it's in my passbook, it's my money, right?" I felt frozen and disappointed by her actions during my mother's funeral, although, in all honesty, her behavior was somewhat expected. It was confirmed that she had entered our room upstairs. The passbook was in the safe of the study room that Steve now uses. The safe was an old dial type, and Steve, finding it tedious to turn the dial, left it unlocked, thinking the study was locked anyway. On the day my mother passed away, I intentionally left the study unlocked, suspecting that she might take the opportunity to enter our room and take the passbook from the safe. That $50,000 is from my father's inheritance. "Do you understand what that means?" I asked her. Unperturbed, she replied, "I know it's my money left by your father. So what's wrong with using it?" I began to feel pity for my mother-in-law. "Sure, it's your money and you're free to use it. But that was meant for your old age. We'll be moving out, so please manage on your own from now on." At first, my mother-in-law looked confused, but she slowly turned pale as she understood my words. "Wait, isn't there a separate fund for the nursing home? It's more than this amount, right?" she inquired. I explained, yes, there was more, but it decreased due to the inflated funeral costs of my father-in-law and your monthly requests for more allowance from Steve. Feeling the need to illustrate the alternatives, I handed her brochures of lovely nursing homes I had collected over several months. She looked at them speechless and shaking. At that moment, Steve and Gina came down from upstairs. I had reported to them after opening the study, so they had come to check. Steve, initially skeptical that his mother had stolen the money, had no complaints about what I did. While I would have properly arranged for my mother-in-law's nursing home if nothing had happened, her intrusion into our room and the theft of the money prompted me to protect my family. I had made it clear that entering our room and touching the money was unacceptable. I decided to sever ties with her for life. Steve, you'll stay in this house, right? It's sad to sell a house filled with memories, but taking care of parents is a son's duty. I desperately clung to Steve. Checking the safe, I realized she had taken more than the passbook, the cash I withdrew for the car inspection too. That's too much. I trusted you, Steve, I said, shocked by her actions. Struggling to speak, Steve admitted, "Oh, I have it. Just borrowed a bit. It was $11,000. But that wasn't all." "What about Hillary's mother's money?" I demanded. Panicking, she replied, "Oh, I'll return that too." "Then it's fine, right, Hillary? You'll forgive me now, won't you?" She hastily handed me the money, possibly pretending about the $50,000 ring. Until the end, there were no words of apology about my mother's money. "I'm sorry, but I can't live with you anymore. I'll protect my own family from now on," I declared. She broke down crying, clinging to Steve till the end. However, Steve's grief-stricken anger was intense, and he acted quickly. He sold her belongings to create a lump sum and found a nursing home affordable on her pension. The chosen home, though, was far from the family home. I probably won't see her again in my lifetime. Steve occasionally gets calls from the home, and she seems calmer now, possibly settling into her new environment. I regretted not placing her in a home earlier. Perhaps if we hadn't lived in that house, her life might have been happier. A part of me felt a little sympathy for her. After she left, we moved, waiting for Jenna's graduation. Jenna got into her desired university and started living on her own. The family home, being in a popular area, quickly found a buyer. Steve is now applying for a transfer to a branch near the sea. We plan to spend a few years until retirement there, searching for our final home. We hope to continue living peacefully and harmoniously as a family.
My mother-in-law told me that anyone who doesn't help with housework isn't welcome here. She seemed to expect me to feel sorry and beg for forgiveness. My husband, sitting beside her, had a smirk on his face, like he was enjoying watching me get scolded. But instead of feeling upset, I surprisingly felt calm. "I'll leave then," I said firmly, without any doubt. "I won't worry about what happens to them anymore." In that moment, I realized they should regret their own behavior. I'm Susan, 42 years old. I work full-time and take care of our home. My husband John and I have 2 grown-up kids who have moved out and are living their own lives. John and I were supposed to be enjoying our time together, but now we're living with my mother-in-law. After our kids moved out, my mother-in-law, who lost her husband, came to live with us. Our peaceful life with my husband changed a lot because of her presence. My job keeps me busy and I often work late, sometimes not getting home until after 8 p.m. Lately, when I come back, I'm frustrated by what I see. The living room is a mess, with snacks and clothes scattered around, and my husband is lounging on the sofa, watching TV and drinking beer without caring about the mess. He doesn't even acknowledge me when I arrive. Dinner isn't prepared, and I can't help but feel disappointed. Ignoring the mess, I go straight to the kitchen to start making dinner as usual. Then my mother-in-law pops her head out of her room and starts lecturing me, as if I'm the one to blame for everything. "You're back so late again. I'm starving. You're always talking about overtime and business trips, but you never take care of the house. You're not a good homemaker." My mother-in-law accuses me, using my late returns as an excuse to criticize my housework. She nitpicks at everything that bothers her and blames me for it all. In these situations, I've learned it's best to just leave her alone until she calms down. Arguing or defending myself only makes things worse. So I pretend to reflect on her words and focus on cooking. Her words hurt, but I endure it because I know she'll eventually quiet down. What's even harder to bear is how my husband seems to enjoy seeing me scolded by my mother-in-law. Women should appreciate their husbands. "You lack charm," my mother-in-law repeats her usual phrases. "That's right, isn't it?" My husband chimes in, mocking the situation. As I serve dinner, I feel anger bubbling up towards my mother-in-law. But it's my husband's behavior that annoys me the most. Despite my repeated requests for them to finish dinner on their own when I'm late, they never listen. Even when I start cooking, they just sit and wait for me to serve the food, as if I'm their personal maid. Our situation has deteriorated since my mother-in-law moved in with us. Before that, my husband used to help with the housework. We managed to raise our kids while both of us worked because of his help. When I was late, he'd make dinner, feed the kids, and take care of things. But now, he's changed. He stopped helping and started joining my mother-in-law in criticizing me. It's confusing and frustrating. My mother-in-law calls me lazy and incompetent, but she's the one who's dependent on us. She hasn't contributed anything towards expenses, even though she inherited money when her husband died. She wasted it on expensive things, ran out of money, and even got into debt. Now she's living with us, basically for free. It all started on the first day we lived together. My mother-in-law announced she'd be more considerate from now on. She bowed deeply, showing humility, but just 3 days later, she started criticizing me again for neglecting housework. At first, her sudden change amused me, but it quickly became serious. She implied I wasn't a good wife because I focused on my job too much. She didn't just complain about housework, she also criticized my job. I explained that I had to work late sometimes, but she didn't listen. Instead, she suggested I take a part-time job at a nearby supermarket. She had her idea of what a daughter-in-law should be, but she didn't understand my job at all. Living with her was a headache. If she didn't like something, like our meal choices, she'd complain. Even simple things like breakfast became a problem. We used to eat bread or buy lunch, but she didn't like that. Now, she reluctantly follows our rules, but she grumbles about it. Dinner is the biggest issue. She insists on dinner at 6 p.m. with at least 3 side dishes, and everyone must eat together. She says that's what a normal family does. But my job often keeps me past 6 p.m., and quitting isn't an option because it would hurt our finances. Is it because John's salary isn't enough? My mother-in-law accuses refusing to believe that I work to support our family. When I look to my husband for support, he just brushes it off, saying I'll eventually learn my lesson. He doesn't defend me, which only adds to my frustration. My husband seems to enjoy playing the role of the understanding and tolerant husband who can't do housework. This annoys me even more. When we first moved in with my mother-in-law, he took her side instead of mine, which was disappointing. Since then, they've both treated me unfairly, as if they're teaming up against me. Whenever I try to get my husband to help with housework, my mother-in-law stops me, saying it's the wife's job. My husband doesn't stand up for me or try to stop her. Even though we used to get along well, now I wonder why things have changed. But then I realize something. My husband smirks every time my mother-in-law criticizes me. Maybe he has a problem with the fact that I earn more than him. He probably doesn't want to do housework either, but he can't complain because he's supposed to be the provider. I think he's been enjoying this situation all along. When my mother-in-law moved in, she often scolded me, questioning if John was the head of the family. It seemed to give him some sort of satisfaction to see me getting yelled at. It made me realize how narrow-minded my husband, whom I had been with for so long, truly was. After that, I spent days worrying about what to do. My mother-in-law was still causing a fuss, and my husband wasn't reliable. But back in the quiet days before my mother-in-law arrived, I lacked the courage to make any decisions. One day, while I was out shopping, a neighbor called out to me and made an unexpected comment. She said I should be more considerate of my mother-in-law. I was surprised and asked her what she meant. She said she didn't particularly like her own mother-in-law, but she didn't think she was being inconsiderate. Then she dropped a bombshell. She had heard about me from my mother-in-law. According to her, I didn't do any housework. The house was always dirty and messy. The laundry piled up. My mother-in-law's rheumatism got worse because she couldn't do chores. And her son came home late from work. It was shocking to hear how I was being portrayed. I don't do anything, and that's why we only eat bread for every meal. My mother-in-law has been crying and complaining about this situation. Lately, I've noticed that people in the neighborhood aren't reacting warmly to me. It dawned on me that it's because of the lies my mother-in-law has been spreading. My small, frail mother-in-law knows how to get sympathy from others. She's probably portraying herself as a suffering mother-in-law dealing with a lazy daughter-in-law who doesn't do any housework. The neighbor looked at me with cold, accusing eyes, and I felt ashamed that our family issues were spreading to the neighborhood. I don't think that's true. I mumbled and quickly went back home. When I walked into the living room, My mother-in-law was watching TV and munching on snacks. "Please stop spreading rumors," I said firmly as I hurried home. My mother-in-law laughed and admitted, "But it's true." I couldn't take it anymore. Something inside me snapped. If she wanted to believe her lies, then fine. From that moment on, I stopped doing any household chores. The next day, when I got home from work, my mother-in-law was yelling as usual, demanding dinner. Ignoring my husband and mother-in-law's remarks, I grabbed a cup of instant ramen noodles from my stash and only made enough for myself. My mother-in-law, seeing this, turned red and continued to yell, "So now you're proving you're the worst daughter-in-law who doesn't do any housework, huh? Fine, if that's how you want to be." As I calmly slurped my noodles, my mother-in-law couldn't come up with a response. She turned to my husband, crying for support. When he finally approached me, I explained what had happened. "Mom's been telling everyone I'm a terrible daughter-in-law who doesn't do any housework." When I asked her to stop, she insisted it was true. So I've decided to stop doing any chores. I'll do exactly what she's been telling everyone. I recounted yesterday's events to my husband. He tried to calm me down, looking troubled. "Mom probably exaggerated things. Don't be so stubborn." Even though my own mother-in-law was bad-mouthing me and it was her fault, my husband still took her side. I didn't even have the energy to argue. I threw the empty cup noodles away, ignored my husband, and went straight to the bathroom. I did my laundry and took a bath alone. As I soaked in the tub, I felt a sense of relief. I should have done this from the beginning. It didn't matter if I did housework or not. I was always labeled a bad wife anyway. From then on, I stopped doing anything. My mother-in-law complained about the lack of breakfast bread. On my day off, when I woke up and went to the living room, she ordered me to go buy bread immediately. "Why don't you go buy it yourself? I'm a bad wife, so I'll only buy my own share. And from now on, either pay for your food or take care of it yourself," I told her, ignoring her. I made myself coffee and ate my own bread, quickly finishing my meal. Seeing my mother-in-law's reaction, I worried I might have been too harsh. But given everything I'd endured, it felt like the least I could do. Afterwards, I only tidied up my own space in the crowded living room and settled down to read a book. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Looking at the monitor, I saw more than 5 elderly people, all familiar faces, looking clearly angry. Confused, I watched as my mother-in-law hurried to open the door. The elderly people lined up outside started coming in one by one. I was stunned when one of them suddenly yelled at me, "I hear you're the wicked woman who doesn't even prepare meals for her own mother-in-law." These elderly people were my mother-in-law's siblings and her spouses. She had told them a false story about how she was mistreated by me, her daughter-in-law. She claimed I didn't feed her properly or let her take a bath, and she asked for their help. My mother-in-law is the youngest of 5 siblings, with 4 older brothers and sisters. With their spouses included, there were 9 elderly people accusing me of being a demon wife who deserved punishment. Being criticized by so many people made me break out in cold sweat from fear. "This is a misunderstanding." I finally managed to argue back, my voice trembling. But then my mother-in-law's eldest brother raised his voice. "Stop making excuses," he shouted, banging the floor with his cane. The others joined in, demanding I apologize and reflect on my actions. My husband arrived after hearing the commotion. My mother-in-law's brother turned to him and criticized my upbringing. My husband didn't defend me. Instead, he criticized me too. He only cared about himself, not me. Any affection I had for him disappeared at that moment. I used to think my husband was kind until we started living with my mother-in-law. But he's not kind, he's just weak, unable to stand up to pressure. He's easily swayed by the opinions of others. One of my mother-in-law's brothers took my husband's words seriously and suggested we divorce. Everyone agreed. My mother-in-law said they might give me another chance if I promised to change and serve her and my husband better in the future. Holding back tears, her siblings told me to be grateful, saying I wouldn't find a kinder mother-in-law anywhere else. They decided they'd take turns each week to check if I was doing the chores and serving my mother-in-law and husband. Once the conversation was over, everyone seemed satisfied. They planned to go out for sushi since they were all together for the first time in a while, and they all left the house. As they left, my mother-in-law made a parting shot, saying the house should be clean and laundry done by the time they got back. Why did it have to come to this? Alone in the messy living room, tears started to well up. We used to be happily married until my mother-in-law moved in. Why am I being complained about by all the relatives despite doing my best? Tears streamed down my face, a mix of sadness, regret, and anger. After a few hours, my husband and mother-in-law returned home. I was still sitting in the messy living room. My mother-in-law smirked and sneered, "Leave. We don't need a wife who doesn't do housework. I told you to clean up earlier, didn't I?" Seemingly tipsy, my mother-in-law ordered me to leave immediately. My husband joined in, his face grinning, thinking this would make me obey quietly. But I had no desire to keep working hard for them, or to do anything for them anymore. "Fine, I'll leave then," I said calmly and got up to leave the living room. Behind me, I heard my mother-in-law and husband laughing, thinking I was bluffing. I didn't care anymore about their reaction. I packed my things in my room and left the house without saying another word to them. About 2 weeks later, my mother-in-law called me. "John says he has no money." "What does that mean?" She seemed frantic. I told her the truth. "John earns only a third of what I do. I've been covering our expenses with my salary, and the house is in my name, so please leave soon." "I'm going to sell it," I urged her, but she insisted it was a joke. I told her to check the bank book in her drawer to see for herself. On the other end of the phone, my mother-in-law fell silent, seemingly shocked by my husband's low salary. Then she started to panic, begging me to come back because she was sorry and my husband was lonely. But I had made up my mind to divorce my husband. I told her I would handle everything through a lawyer and hung up the phone, ignoring her tearful apologies. Later, with the help of a lawyer, I filed for divorce, citing the actions of my mother-in-law and husband as the reason. The divorce was granted, and I felt relieved. I even received a small consolation payment. When I told my children about the divorce and what had happened, they supported me, agreeing that it was my husband and mother-in-law's fault. After that, I sold the house, and my husband and mother-in-law moved out. They had to stay with relatives temporarily since they had lost their home. As a result, my mother-in-law's lies were exposed, and it seems that my husband and mother-in-law were rejected by their relatives. I've heard they are now living in a small apartment together, struggling due to my husband's low salary. They spend their days blaming each other for my departure. My husband frequently messages me, asking for reconciliation now that he's cut ties with his mother. However, I'm considering blocking him soon because it's becoming bothersome. Without their nagging, I feel free. I plan to live my life gracefully from now on, focusing on myself.
My name is Sarah, and these days, I collaborate with my husband John at his family-run company. The enterprise, led by my father-in-law, Richard, is a small but inviting establishment employing about 6 individuals. Richard, a man of few words, seldom involves himself in the day-to-day operations of the company. Instead, John, poised to become the next president, works tirelessly, actively pursuing clients and securing new projects, demonstrating his dedication to the company's expansion. During significant projects, all the employees come together, creating a vibrant and enthusiastic atmosphere. I've been part of this spirited environment for the past 10 years, ever since I got married. However, my mother-in-law, Nancy, seems to harbor some discontent about my role. As I returned home early to prepare dinner while John remained at the office, Nancy, who had been part of the family business until our marriage, confronted me with disapproving words. "How long do you plan on clinging to our family business?" Nancy asked, her words laden with criticism. Nancy, who had looked forward to relaxation post-retirement, appeared to redirect her energy into scrutinizing my choices. In response, I tried to maintain composure, asking, "What do you mean by clinging?" Nancy retorted with a cutting tone, suggesting that I must have married John out of necessity and was now taking advantage of working in their company. Sighing inwardly, I realized that such accusations from her had become more frequent lately. When I got married, I willingly left my previous job to join John's family-run business. It was my decision, not a result of unemployment. However, Nancy seemed convinced of my incompetence at work. I attempted to explain, "Mom, it's not that I couldn't work elsewhere. I chose to join John's company." Her dismissive retort revealed her lack of understanding, as she believed she saw through my supposed hidden motives. The issues with my mother-in-law extended beyond words. Despite quitting her job with the promise of managing the household, she refused to contribute, leaving my father-in-law to repeatedly request her assistance with housework. Instead, she stubbornly insisted, "I've worked all my life. Now it's the daughter-in-law's turn to do the housework." Consequently, the responsibility often fell on me to prepare dinner, clean up after meals, and manage other household tasks. One sunny afternoon, mustering courage, I decided to address the domestic issue. "Nancy," I began hesitantly, "I've noticed the dishes often get left in the sink. It would be helpful if you could tidy up after your meals." My small request, however, triggered an angry response. She accused me of giving orders in her own house and questioned my right as a daughter-in-law to dictate her actions. Caught in this exhausting exchange, I realized that if I didn't start preparing dinner soon, we'd be eating much later than usual. Despite my internal frustrations, I managed to keep a composed exterior. "Mom, let's continue this conversation later," I suggested, attempting to diffuse the tension momentarily. Needing to focus on preparing dinner, as it seemed we would eat late tonight, Nancy finally retreated to the living room, leaving me alone with my thoughts amidst the clatter of cooking utensils. Both Richard and John were aware of Nancy's mistreatment towards me as their daughter-in-law, and they attempted to intervene whenever they witnessed it happening. However, their efforts seemed to have little effect. Each time they confronted the situation, their faces betrayed concern and frustration, a testament to their desire to foster harmony in our family dynamic. Ironically, whenever Richard and John scolded Nancy for her behavior, she redirected her anger towards me, becoming even more hostile and sharp with her words. Her usually kind and gentle demeanor twisted with disdain, her tone cutting deeper than before. Though I had never experienced physical violence, the emotional toll of Nancy's words was significant. Richard and John's support had been my solace, allowing me to somewhat overlook Nancy's harsh words. Until one unimaginable morning. Just after I had finished cleaning up from breakfast and was preparing to leave for work amidst the morning rush, Nancy exclaimed, "Oh my, what a mess they trash here." And without warning, she doused my handbag with a bucket of water. I was stunned, a mixture of shock and anger rendering me speechless. "What are you doing, Nancy?" I managed to stutter out, my voice trembling with disbelief. Nancy's response was flippant, resembling that of a mischievous child. "Oh, was that your stuff? I thought it was just a big piece of trash." Her casual dismissal infuriated me. Even if you thought it was trash, who pours water on it? What kind of mindset is that? Now the carpet is all wet. What about the vacuum cleaner? My words were a jumble of anger and confusion as I frantically emptied the water-soaked contents of my bag, including documents I needed for work, onto the table. Nancy responded nonchalantly, her face calm, showing no signs of remorse or concern for my distress. "Because you don't need to go to work anymore." I was baffled. In our living room, bathed in morning light, I sat opposite Nancy, her expression colder and more resolute than usual. It was as if she had made a decision that would change everything. "Excuse me?" My response was laden with confusion and surprise. "You've been clinging to this house for 10 years, but finally I can get rid of you." Her words pierced my heart, her voice carrying a level of anger and determination I had never heard before. My mind reeled, and my heart filled with sorrow. "Getting rid of me?" I questioned, disbelief in my voice. Her words made me feel like an outsider in this family. "In fact, my daughter is joining the company, so we need you to leave. Today's your last day. Well, all you have to do today is bow your head to your father-in-law and John, apologizing for all the trouble you've caused." Her mocking laughter further wounded me. She was using my position at work to force me out. I had dedicated years to that job, building respect and memories. I was dumbfounded. My heart was filled with disbelief at her merciless decision. I had devoted myself to this family, but it seemed my sacrifices meant nothing to her. Are you sure about this? Wasn't Jessica working in a clothing store in Manhattan? My words reflected my confusion and apprehension. My job was more than just a source of income. It was my avenue for self-fulfillment. Meanwhile, Jessica, my sister-in-law, seemed to have grown tired of city life and had chosen to return to the family. She said she was tired of dealing with the cold people of Manhattan. So I told her as she came back home, I have a job ready for her. She agreed to return immediately. Now that she's coming back, I want you out of this house. Her words were difficult to comprehend. She was ready to upend my life with a single decision, completely disregarding my place in the family. Without even listening to me. I've written your resignation letter, she said, handing me an envelope. She effectively expelled me from the house. In that moment, my heart shattered completely. Everything I had built over the years was reduced to nothing, treated like a mere piece of paper. Her actions severed our family bond irreparably. I headed to the company, just a brisk 3-minute walk from my home, my mind a whirlwind of apprehension and anticipation. As I walked under the cool morning sky, each step felt heavy with the weight of what was to come. Upon reaching the office, I shared with my father-in-law Richard and my husband John. I relayed what my mother-in-law had said. Their faces were a mix of shock and thinly veiled anger, yet they remained composed. They suggested that maybe, just maybe, it was time for me to resign to show her the reality of the situation. This suggestion sent my heart into turmoil. Having worked tirelessly in our family-run business for years, I barely knew what a long vacation felt like, aside from brief respites during Thanksgiving and the holiday season. Encouraged by John and Richard's gentle words, "Why don't you spread your wings for a change?" I made up my mind to embark on a little trip. As I packed, I found myself pondering deeply about my life, my choices, and what lay ahead. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law Jessica, who had come to replace me at the company, shockingly didn't show up until 1:00 p.m. Her irresponsible attitude left John and Richard, who had been holding the fort in my absence, in a state of dismay. Jessica seemed utterly disinterested in understanding the work despite their attempts to explain it to her. Hearing about this, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of anxiety about the future of our company, even as I looked forward to my trip. Departing without encountering my mother-in-law, I swiftly set off. During the trip, as I enjoyed the view outside the train, I reflected on my life, the past, the present, and what was yet to come. Relishing the local seafood delicacies, I contemplated deeply about myself, my family, and our business. However, the tranquility of my 4th day was shattered when Jessica called me in tears. "What's going on? Mom said it was an easy job, just sitting in a chair, but John and Dad are acting like I can't do anything right." Her words, most likely given to her by my mother-in-law, took me by surprise. Even as I enjoyed my leisure, I realized it was time to address the situation. "So, Jessica, how proficient are you with computers?" Hesitantly, she replied. "Well, I usually watch videos online and play games too." Her answer indicated her limited experience with technical aspects. Delving deeper, I asked about her familiarity with software tools such as Word or Excel, and her response was puzzled. Considering her background in the Manhattan apparel industry, it was unlikely that she never used a computer. Tasks such as tracking sales and managing inventory would have required her to use Excel. When asked if she could handle calculations for sales or fill in documents, she confidently answered, "I could handle that task." However, when probed further with, "Can you calculate tax too, right?" her confidence waned, and she responded uncertainly. This question was a test of her mathematical skills and her ability to apply them in a business context. While Jessica might possess other skills, it was apparent she felt insecure about the required skill set for the job. Her discomfort seemed particularly rooted in her struggle with calculations, which could be why she faced criticism from Richard and John. First and foremost, it was necessary to give my mother-in-law and her cohort, who tried to oust me, a taste of their own medicine. To begin with, Since you're taking over my job, I expect you to handle the accounting tasks efficiently. Be mindful of email etiquette. A casual tone suitable for friends is utterly inappropriate for business communication. Also, you'll be responsible for scheduling the staff shifts. Though our team is small, everyone's requests for time off are carefully considered, so make sure not to prioritize your own convenience over theirs. As I continued to list down my demands, I could hear her sobbing on the other end of the line. But I was told I wouldn't have to do anything. Why are there so many tasks? I didn't come back home for this. She abruptly ended the call. In the following 3 days, I decided to enjoy sightseeing in Manhattan, where Jessica had fled. From my experience, I learned that not everyone in Manhattan is cold-hearted. In fact, it seemed rarer to find people as cold-hearted as my mother-in-law and Jessica, who had conspired to drive me away. A week after leaving my job, I returned to my in-laws' house. Upon my arrival, Nancy, with her face flushed red, confronted me with a burst of anger. "How dare you make my daughter cry? You won't get away with this," Nancy exclaimed furiously, her eyes brimming with anger and misunderstanding. She made a move to grab me, but John and Richard quickly intervened. They tried to calm her down, but her anger seemed far from subsiding. John sighed deeply before speaking. "Jessica is crying because she was scolded for trying to boss around her employees, despite her inability to do anything right. It's not Sarah's fault. Besides, Sarah hasn't been here for a week, so there's no way she could have upset Jessica. Mother, you really need to stop these baseless accusations." John's voice was calm yet carried weight, trying to convey the facts and clear the misunderstanding. "But it's because of her. This woman is the reason for Jessica's suffering," Nancy retorted, her voice emotional, directing her baseless suspicions towards me. Her words lacked any foundation of truth. "Where is Jessica, by the way?" I asked, looking around the living room. But Jessica was nowhere to be seen, adding more mystery to the already puzzling situation. It doesn't matter to me that Nancy is upset about Jessica, but Jessica has no place to go since she terminated her lease in her Manhattan apartment. I thought she would be at her parents' house, but her absence raised questions. I pondered. John explained. "Jessica's locked herself in her room. She's been crying and saying she doesn't want to go to work anymore." It seemed like Jessica had run away from learning the job well. It was understandable that she would find it challenging, considering she lacked the skills to fill in for me. "You've been poisoning John and Richard against me, haven't you? If not, they wouldn't say the company ran better with me than with the incompetent Jessica," Nancy accused me vehemently. Her words were filled with long-standing misunderstandings and prejudices, leaving me utterly perplexed. She seemed to have always viewed me as an adversary, her words reflecting years of misconceptions. John let out a heavy sigh, his face showing weariness and frustration with the tangled web of emotions in this family. He had tried repeatedly to resolve the misunderstandings among family members, but his efforts seemed far from fruitful. "Mom," he began, trying once again to bring clarity to the situation. "I realize it might sound a bit unusual, but Sarah is truly exceptional at her work. She holds a certification in bookkeeping, and her secretarial skills are top-notch. Moreover, she has studied Spanish and even has experience studying abroad. When it comes to dealing with multiple languages at our company, Sarah is the one who handles everything," John explained with a sense of pride, and his mother Nancy looked utterly surprised. Nancy had assumed that I quit my job as soon as I joined the family, so she had no idea about my contributions and achievements at work. What? That sounds like something straight out of a TV drama. Actually, back in college, I was so focused on getting various certifications that I immersed myself in my studies, to the point where I hardly participated in clubs or had time for a romantic relationship. It was during this phase of my life that I met John, who visited my company for business. I inadvertently found myself sharing the story of how John and I first met. However, I realized that this wasn't what Nancy wanted to hear, so I steered the conversation back to the original topic. In a nutshell, I was entrusted with a wide array of responsibilities at the company, From handling accounting tasks to schedule coordination, liaising with other companies, and managing employee shifts. There were numerous tasks under my purview. Thanks to that, I was able to focus on reaching out to other companies for business deals. The work environment became much more comfortable compared to the times when you were around. Mom, John added, leaving Nancy with her mouth agape in amazement. Just then, Richard, John's father, chimed in with a comment that took me by surprise. We're going to shut down that company soon. Actually, Jessica made a big blunder. Despite being asked to prepare some documents, she decided to handle phone calls because it seemed more fun doing so. While John and I were away, she ended up behaving rudely to the person in charge from Company A. Of course, I got a call to confirm this. Hearing this, I was so shocked that I instinctively covered my mouth with my hand. I can't believe Jessica would do something like that, I murmured. Filled with disbelief, the thought that Jessica's actions might lead to the downfall of our company flashed through my mind, filling me with dread. However, as I wallowed in these anxious thoughts, the story took an unexpected turn. When I explained the situation, they suggested it might be time to end the family business. We haven't mentioned this before, right? About being absorbed by another company. The president of Company A stepped forward, saying he was interested. This was an unexpected yet long-hoped-for development. With a family-run business, there are limitations, and it's uncertain whether we could consistently acquire a stable customer base. That's why John had always been working hard in sales, trying to secure new clients. Being absorbed by a larger company could mean securing a steady customer base. The once uncertain future suddenly seemed to hold a glimmer of hope. However, this news brought relief only to me, John, and his father. John's mother suddenly opposed the idea, saying, "That's not acceptable. John must become the president. This company is ours, isn't it?" I was taken aback by this sudden change in the situation. It seemed that more than a stable future, Nancy was concerned about maintaining the status of being part of a company president's family, part of an executive family. And you're telling me he's not going to be the president anymore? Absolutely not acceptable, exclaimed Nancy passionately. This commotion piqued the interest of Jessica, who was upstairs in her room, leaving her to come down to the living room to see what was happening. In response to the chaos started by Nancy, Richard spoke up with a calm but final statement. "I am divorcing you, so either way, you will no longer be part of this executive family. Not only have you not changed your attitude towards my wife, but you also neglect household chores. To top it off, you spend your days out with young men instead of being home. I have no intention of supporting such a wife any longer." This was news to both me and John. We were so shocked that we could only stare at Sarah's father-in-law with wide eyes. It seemed he had planned to discuss divorce from the beginning, as he took out divorce papers and a photo of Nancy with a young man from the living room shelf, placing them on the table. "If you sign the divorce papers now and leave with your belongings, I won't demand alimony. I know getting any money from you would be futile anyway." So unfair. Divorce? How can you say that? Haven't I devoted myself to this house all these years? Have you done any proper housework in these last 10 years? Have you ever helped with the business? Does spending someone else's money on young men count as devotion to the house? It was the first time we saw Sarah's usually mild-mannered and reserved father-in-law this angry. Seeing this, Jessica, who had come down to the living room, was visibly trembling from the shock. "Jessica, you're part of this too. You came back home because you couldn't make it in Manhattan, and now you can't find a job but still act all high and mighty. In the end, you stopped working entirely. Whose escapism did you inherit? It's time for you to leave this house." Next, we saw Jessica's shock and resistance. She believed she was an important member of the family, but the reality was different. "Wait a minute, Dad. Mom might be a lost cause, but I'm your precious daughter, right?" The family conflict deepened as Jessica asserted her place, revealing her betrayal towards her mother. "Jessica, are you betraying Mom now?" Nancy was astounded, feeling betrayed by her daughter at the last moment. However, as the two started to create a commotion, he sternly silenced them with a shout. "If I just kick you out, it'll cause trouble for everyone, so I've asked an acquaintance to take you in. They'll be here soon to pick you up. Get your minimum belongings ready." Left with no choice but to obey, Nancy began packing her belongings with Jessica. After writing the divorce notice, then an acquaintance of the stepfather arrived to take Nancy and Jessica away. The person who came to pick them up was running a factory with dormitories, and it seemed they would be working there. John, Richard, and I talked to the employees about the company being absorbed and prepared for the busy days ahead for our future. Finally, I found out I was pregnant at that time. When I told the president of company A, he was delighted and promised to send someone to replace me, which was a huge relief. Currently, John and Richard are working even harder for the sake of our upcoming child. Receiving an allowance without having to tackle any household chores is a pleasant perk. However, the routine sarcasm from my mother-in-law, Julia, at 32, and working as a web designer often dampens the experience. Sharing a home with my husband, Ethan, and my mother-in-law has its challenges, especially considering our differing perspectives on work and domestic responsibilities. Originally part of a corporate environment, I transitioned into freelancing after marriage, a change welcomed by both my employer and me. The familiarity with my previous company ensures a steady stream of projects, sparing me the hassles of commuting and allowing a more concentrated effort on household tasks. Despite the satisfaction on both ends, my traditional mother-in-law doesn't share the enthusiasm. She harbors a belief in the conventional role of a wife as a homemaker, a viewpoint she expresses regularly. Despite my husband's attempts to reason with her, asserting that contemporary couples support each other, my mother-in-law remains resistant. According to her, my freelance work is merely a side job that doesn't contribute significantly to the household finances. Balancing my web design work with household chores during my free time hasn't impressed my mother-in-law. Her dissatisfaction stems from the stark contrast between my non-traditional approach and her expectations of a more conventional housewife. In her eyes, I may be perceived as the outsider who, in her mind, stole her only son. Since my husband's father passed away 5 years ago, my mother-in-law has become increasingly dependent on him. While this seems to slightly bother my husband, there's a subtle satisfaction in his acknowledgement of her reliance. Our current residence, acquired by my late father-in-law 30 years ago, now solely belongs to my mother-in-law. The mortgage was settled through life insurance, and the house layout conveniently accommodates our small family, providing me with a suitable workspace. Despite the occasional tension, our home becomes a gathering place for my mother-in-law's friends, who have been part of the neighborhood for over 3 decades. When her friends come over, the dynamics in the house take on a different tone. Taking a break from my work, I play the role of a gracious hostess to my mother-in-law's friends, offering them coffee and sweets. Yet every gathering of similarly aged women inevitably transforms into a session of complaints about their daughters-in-law. In the midst of such discussions, I can't help but chuckle as they detail their grievances. My daughter-in-law, they say, frequently returns to her parents' house over trivial matters, spending half the year away from us. According to them, she is financially irresponsible, causing even our son to be at a loss about how to handle her financial habits. Debt collectors have even paid us visits, they lament. The conversations in my workspace often take a humorous turn, with my mother-in-law's friends seemingly competing over who has the most challenging daughter-in-law. Rarely do they praise their daughters-in-law. If, by chance, one of them offers a compliment, "Your family's daughter-in-law is wonderful. She manages the household while working," my mother-in-law responds with a disgruntled expression, dismissing my work as nothing more than a side job. Amidst the laughter and gossip, my mother-in-law loudly questions the worth of my job. wondering aloud how much I actually earn. The discussion shifts to the spending habits of daughters-in-law, contrasting their personal expenses with the notion that the husband's earnings are meant for the family. The room erupts in laughter at this notion, reminiscing about the unthinkable nature of such discussions in their younger days. Unable to endure the repetitive tales of the past, I drown out the noise with headphones, focusing on my work. The modern-day daughter-in-law, myself included, often becomes the target of belittlement, making it unbearable to listen. One day, during a family dinner, my husband suggested buying a new car. My mother-in-law, quick to react, questioned why he needed his wife's consent for such decisions. Despite my husband's attempt to explain that it's a family decision, my mother-in-law insisted that he, the one with a driver's license, should choose any car he likes. Caught in the middle, my husband sought my help, and I diplomatically deferred the decision to him. The incident highlighted the ongoing dynamic where my husband always consults both me and my mother-in-law before making significant decisions, a practice my mother-in-law staunchly defended. While not inherently self-centered, my father-in-law had a penchant for making independent decisions, a trait my mother-in-law often lamented. My husband, raised by such parents, developed a belief in avoiding selfishness. On the contrary, my mother-in-law, influenced by the patriarchal behavior of my father-in-law, adhered to the notion that it was the norm. My mother-in-law's irritation towards my husband when he seeks my opinion circles back to me, with accusations that I am always too strict. I found myself at a loss for words in response to her criticism, as it's true that I tend to voice my concerns rather than making decisions independently. To my surprise, my husband, aligning with his mother, blamed me for his inclination to check with me before acting. Months into our marriage, I realized that my husband never defended me in front of his mother, even when it was just the two of us. His apologies and claims of prioritizing me seemed less convincing over time. The recent incident of choosing a new car cast a shadow on our relationship. Initially considerate, my husband ultimately failed to support me in front of his mother. Concerns about our future together began to surface, and I pondered alternatives to the current dynamics. I wished my husband would not mistake indecisiveness for kindness, and I longed for my mother-in-law to express her thoughts more directly. A month later, my husband's new car arrived, and the enthusiasm was palpable. The joyous invitation for a drive and the admiration from my mother-in-law turned sour when the cost was revealed: $660,000. Shocked by the extravagant choice, I confronted my husband about the financial implications, only to receive nonchalant responses and an offer to use a loan. My mother-in-law, quick to defend my husband, criticized my complaints about the expenditure, stating that I had given him the freedom to decide. Frustrated, I questioned the feasibility of affording such a luxury, only to be met with my mother-in-law's sharp retort: "It's not like you're paying, so you have no right to complain." Feeling unheard and dismissed, I argued that I contribute to the family income through my work. However, my mother-in-law, with an unusual harshness, questioned the legitimacy of my earnings, asserting that my little side job couldn't possibly match my husband's substantial income of over $100,000 a year. She regarded me with contempt, and just as I was about to assert that my earnings supported us, I noticed my husband had disappeared. Tolerating this treatment for too long, I reached my limit. My mother-in-law's declaration, "A daughter-in-law like you should just get out," echoed in my ears. It wasn't only her putting up with things, and discussing my salary seemed trivial now. Angry at her words and disappointed by my husband's indifference, I felt he was to blame for our dispute, given his usual indecisiveness. Fed up, I declared, "Understood then. I will leave," and headed to my workspace to pack up my computer and essentials. As I left the house, I informed my mother-in-law that I would return for the rest of my belongings later. Her angry gaze followed me, while my husband remained unseen in his room. As my mother-in-law screamed, "When you step into this house again, it will be after signing the divorce papers," I left without responding. Her abusive words, A first-time experience bewildered me, but I chose not to engage further. Leaving my husband's house, I sought refuge at my parents' home. Surprised, my mother inquired about what had happened. Unable to specify, I lamented my lack of judgment and how my husband, who once cherished me deeply, had changed. Sharing the interactions with my husband's family with my parents brought some relief. With no children in the picture, my mother advised me to consider divorce sooner rather than later, given my financial independence. Over the weekend, with my father's help, I moved my belongings out of my husband's family home. My husband and mother-in-law remained elusive. Standing in front of my husband's room, I quietly spoke, "You took care of me for a long time. Can you sign the divorce papers?" Slipping the documents under the door, I heard his indifferent voice, "I've signed it. We're done here." As the divorce papers were returned to me, ending my marriage without a word to my mother-in-law left me with a lingering sense of sadness. After 2 years in a house filled with few happy memories, I decided to quietly leave and head to the city office to submit the divorce papers. If a piece of paper could resolve everything, then all the better. The plan was to stay at my parents' house for the time being and continue my work there as I prepared to embark on a new life alone. As I geared up for this solo journey, my mother suggested I stay with them for a while, stating it would be less worrying than living alone. My father, too, voiced his concerns, warning that Ethan and his mother could unpredictably show up at my place. Although I initially considered such scenarios unlikely, life at my parents' home proved comforting. Thankfully, my job flexibility allowed me to work from anywhere, so I decided to extend my stay at my parents' house for a while. 2 months passed, and just as my ex-husband and mother-in-law were fading into distant memories, an unknown number flashed on my phone. Initially hesitant, I thought it might be a mistake, but after repeated calls, I answered only to find my ex-husband's frantic voice on the other end. "Why don't you answer the phone?" he asked, sounding confused, ready to end the call. I responded that since there was no need for us to interact anymore, I would hang up. His next question caught me off guard. "Wait a minute, why isn't my smartphone working?" Without much interest, I suggested he contact the mobile phone company. However, a sudden realization struck me, and I inquired if he had been depositing money into the bank account. I used to deposit my salary, along with his, into our joint account, but it was always short due to the performance-based nature of his health product sales job. Normally, I would deposit money at the end of the month, but for the past 3 months, only his salary had been deposited. As the pieces fell into place, I left in the middle of the month, and the new car's loan payments might have kicked in. My ex-husband remained silent. "I've been managing the household with my income up to now. From now on, please manage your own living expenses," I calmly asserted over the phone. Inwardly, I felt the urge to say, "You reap what you sow," but I chose to refrain and quietly ended the call. It occurred to me that my ex-husband had never disclosed his true income to his mother. It seemed she was unaware that our post-marriage livelihood was predominantly based on my salary. Perhaps my ex-husband was too ashamed to admit that his wife earned more than he did. Despite the general knowledge that basic utilities like electricity and water aren't easily cut off, it became evident that mobile phone service could be the first to go. One holiday morning, the house intercom insisted, signaling trouble. My father sternly informed someone at the front door, "We don't want to be involved with you anymore. Please leave." Sensing something serious, I rushed to the entrance with my mother. My former mother-in-law's voice sounded from the intercom, requesting a moment to talk. Tensing up, I faced her, and just as my father predicted, she had come to our home. Anger filled her face as she exclaimed upon seeing me. She blamed me for not making the monthly deposit, resulting in the electricity and water being cut off. We were all stunned by this revelation, unsure of what she meant. My ex-husband, attempting to intervene, declared, "Mom, stop it. Julia is no longer involved with us." However, his mother brushed off his hand, continuing her rage. "Ethan earns $5,000. How can this happen?" I corrected her quietly, revealing that the $5,000 was actually my income. Shocked by my declaration, she turned to my ex-husband. He admitted, almost inaudibly, that his take-home pay was about $500. My former mother-in-law stared at me in astonishment, and I clarified that my income was not just from an allowance but a regular job. She then asked about Ethan's take-home pay, and he responded, about $500. After a moment of silence, she made an unbelievable proposition. Julia, how about coming back? It was a joke to ask you to leave. Firmly refusing, I stated that we were already divorced, and it was no longer my concern. Despite my refusal, she persisted, suggesting that everything could be resolved if I got back with Ethan. My father, in a forceful tone, demanded they leave and warned of involving the police if they didn't. They left hurriedly, stumbling away as my father warned them not to step foot in our home again. Reflecting on their unreasonable behavior, my mother was furious, but my father seemed even more indignant. I was relieved that we had cut ties with such people. As time passed, through a friend of my ex-husband's, I learned about his subsequent situation. He had to give up his parents' house, including the land, and moved into a small apartment with his mother. The rarely used new car was sold, settling the remaining loan with the money from the house and land sale. Despite the loan being paid off, my ex-husband squandered money on gambling, and his whereabouts became unknown. My former mother-in-law was diagnosed with dementia and now resides in a nursing home. Meanwhile, I am doing well in my job and currently live alone. Recently, I started dating a man I met through work. He understands that I was previously married, and he is committed to his job, not relying on his spouse's income or indulging in extravagant purchases like my ex-husband did. While we haven't discussed marriage explicitly, I feel that we have a serious future together.
I can't find my special bracelet. I think my mother-in-law might have taken it without asking again. Don't be upset, it's a gift from Mom. Just try to accept it, my husband said. I often notice that my mother-in-law takes my things without asking, and my husband always supports her. I feel frustrated because he doesn't stand up for me. It's tough for me. Then something terrible happened. Someone stole my husband's favorite fancy car. I know who did it. My name is Emma, and I'm 28 years old. My happy life with my husband, Ethan, started to fall apart about a year after we got married. We both have jobs. But I finish work earlier, so I go home and start making dinner. That day, while waiting for my husband to come home, he surprised me with some big news. Mom's coming to stay with us from next week onwards. Wait, really? She's staying overnight? I couldn't believe it. My husband let out a big sigh. No, she's not just staying overnight. She's moving in. Moving in? Like living with us? I asked, trying to understand. Yeah, exactly. Since Dad passed away, Mom's been on her own. She's getting older, and it's tough for her, my husband explained. Wait a minute. You can't just decide this without talking to me. We have our own lives too. Can't you give me some time to think about it? I pleaded. But my husband just smiled and shrugged it off. It's okay, Mom wants to feel safe. She just wants to stay with us. I understand she might feel lonely and scared, but you made this big decision without asking me. Couldn't you have at least talked to me about it? Why do I have to tell you everything? She's my mom, he argued back. That's exactly it. She's your mom, not mine. I have to change everything because of this. What are you so upset about anyway? It's decided. Just deal with it. I argued back. Wait. I called out, but my husband ignored me and left the room, leaving me feeling frustrated. How could he decide we're all going to live together without even talking to me about it? I still have to adjust, no matter what. Ethan doesn't help out around the house and acts like it's no big deal because she's his mom. We've tried talking about it, but he just says, it's done, and shuts down the conversation. As expected, the next week, his mom, my mother-in-law, showed up at our house like it was planned. If she was a normal person, I wouldn't mind living together. But every time I see her, she says mean things and treats me badly. That's why I avoid going to her house unless I have to. But now, suddenly, we're supposed to live together. As I expected, my mother-in-law started criticizing me from the very first day. "Emma, did you know I was coming today? There's trash in the corner," she scolded. "I'm sorry, I was working and didn't have time to clean," I explained. Excuses, excuses. Couldn't you have cleaned up after work? But then I wouldn't have time to make dinner. Oh, come on, stop arguing back. How do you even handle being Ethan's wife? Be more efficient. I'm sorry, I stuttered. Just 10 minutes in our house, and it's already like this. I'm really worried about what's going to happen next. From that day on, my mother-in-law's controlling behavior got worse, and it stressed me out constantly. Then one day, I came home from work, and my mother-in-law greeted me with a big smile, saying, "Welcome home." I usually don't get such a warm welcome, so it felt strange. Then I noticed something shiny around her neck. Wait, is that my necklace? It looked just like mine. Feeling uneasy, I hurried to my room and checked my jewelry box. My suspicion was right. I went straight to the living room and confronted my mother-in-law, who was sitting there calmly. "That necklace, it's mine, isn't it?" I accused. "Oh, we finally noticed. It looks good on me, doesn't it?" she replied shamelessly. "What are you talking about? Stop using my things without asking." "What's the big deal? It's not like it's going to disappear or anything." But that's not the issue here. Stop complaining and get dinner ready. Ethan will be home soon. Even while I was getting dinner ready, my mother-in-law kept interfering, making me more and more stressed. That night, I couldn't take it anymore and decided to talk to my husband. "Hey Ethan, can we talk? What's on your mind? Today I found your mother wearing my necklace without asking." "Oh, so you're saying she went into my room, opened my jewelry box, and basically took it? Isn't that a bit of an exaggeration?" "How am I exaggerating? Come on, I'm sure Mom didn't mean any harm." I felt angry that my husband was taking his mother's side. Trying to stay calm, I continued to explain. "So you're saying it's fine to just go into someone's room without asking and take their things? A normal person would at least apologize." "Well, Mom probably just saw something she liked and took it." "But that's not the point, Ethan. You need to talk to her." "What? Me? Your mother disrespects me. Telling her off won't do anything, so you, her son, need to do it." "Okay, fine. I'll handle it, all right." Despite my insistence, it seemed my husband forgot about it by the next day. I shot him a few angry looks, but he never confronted his mother. Since then, my mother-in-law started using my things without asking, basically borrowing them without permission. No matter how much I complained, she didn't listen. And since there are no locks on the doors in this house, telling her off would be pointless unless she changes her ways. If this keeps happening, I'll end up losing my belongings. I have to stop my mother-in-law's behavior. I need to come up with some sort of plan. Then, one day, something happened that I absolutely couldn't forgive. It's missing. How could this happen? Today, I had plans to meet up with a friend and wanted to wear my late mother's bracelet for the occasion. It's a precious item, so I never keep it in the jewelry box. Instead, it's hidden deep in my desk drawer. And yet, it's gone. The only person who could have taken it is my mother-in-law. When I confront her firmly, she casually admits to taking it. "Of that bracelet, I just borrowed it." "Then give it back right now. I need it." "I can't do that." "Why not?" "Because I sold it." "What? You stole it? Is this some kind of joke? Who steals someone else's stuff?" Though shaken, I stood my ground. "Stop kidding around. Give it back now." "I'm not kidding, by the way. Most of the things I've borrowed from you, I sold those too." "What? What were you thinking?" As I argued with my mother-in-law, my husband Ethan, who had just woken up, joined us. "Ethan, listen to this." Quickly, I explained the situation. "Your mom sold my bracelet, the one that belonged to my late mom. Plus, she's been selling off most of the things she's borrowed from me without asking." "Mom, is this true?" Faced with the question, my mother-in-law stuck out her tongue in a teasing way. "I'm on a fixed income, you know. I don't want to be a burden, but I can't make ends meet without a little extra cash." "You've got to be joking. Who gave you the right?" "Don't get so upset. I didn't mean any harm." "If you meant no harm, you wouldn't be selling and taking other people's things." That's because, but I interrupted her. Where did you sell it? Get it back right now. Just then, my husband yelled, enough is enough. He wasn't looking at his mom though, he was glaring at me. Confused, I asked him, why are you yelling at me, Ethan? Your mom took my bracelet without asking. Be quiet. I did it for mom. Stop complaining. For mom? Seriously. Why should I give up my precious things for her? Because it makes mom happy. She's your mother-in-law. Show some respect. Just do as you're told. I couldn't handle it anymore. Not his mom stealing from me and not Ethan taking her side. I couldn't live like this anymore. Driven by growing anger, I shouted, that's it. If you won't give it back, let's get a divorce. Stop joking about divorce. I'm not joking, I'm serious. Fine, whatever. I'll get the divorce papers today. Fine, if that's what you want, I'm okay with it. As we argued, I noticed a satisfied look on his mom's face. She never liked me. Her real goal was probably to get rid of me and have this house to herself and her son. That night, my husband came home with divorce papers filled out. After signing them, I started packing. I decided to wait for the right moment to leave. The next day, during my work break, I saw multiple missed calls from my sister Sophia, who lived nearby. Something must have happened. I called her back, and she told me shocking news. Wait, Sophia, is that true? It is, no doubt about it. It's not common around here, but why? I took a photo, so I'll send it. Make sure to check it on your end too, sis. Okay, got it. After hanging up, my sister sent the photo. It was undeniable evidence that could expose my mother-in-law. When I got home and was calmly making dinner, my husband Ethan rushed in, looking worried. Emma, this is serious. What happened? My car, my prize car, is gone. Wow, that's serious. Why aren't you more worried? You know how much that car means to me. I do. It's the car I've been dreaming of since I was single, and I finally bought it last year, remember? Exactly. So be more concerned. We're still paying off the loan for it. Where could it have gone? Please don't tell me. Emma, did you take it? Of course not. I have my own car, and I know you'd be furious if I took yours. But then where? I glanced at my mother-in-law, and she quickly looked away. That confirmed my suspicion. Ethan, I think your mom knows something. What? Why would mom know? I asked her directly, and my mother-in-law's face turned pale. What are you talking about, Emma? How is mom involved? Well, I got a call from Sophia today. Sophia, she happened to be out shopping and saw your mom driving your car. What? That car is pretty unique, being a foreign model and blue. It's quite noticeable around here. Sophia even recognized the license plate. Wait, what's happening here, Ethan? Now visibly angry, Ethan confronted his mother. Mother-in-law started making excuses. No, Ethan, I just borrowed the car for a bit. Borrowed? Seriously? I've told you so many times not to touch that car. I'm sorry, but I really wanted to drive it. What on earth did you do with the car then? Did you leave it somewhere? No, not exactly, but I did leave the keys in the ignition. Someone from the neighborhood might have taken it. Stolen? Seriously? I swear I drove the car all the way home. I'm not lying. I showed my mother-in-law a photo to prove my point. Is this why you're lying? Did you wreck the car like this? I showed her a photo from my sister, Sophia. It clearly showed my mother-in-law driving a badly damaged luxury car. My sister sent this just in case. You took Ethan's car and wrecked it so badly that you couldn't drive it back, didn't you? No, that's not what happened. Where's the car anyway? And if someone stole it from the neighborhood, someone would have noticed, right? Well, my husband started shaking next to me, his voice full of anger as he yelled at his mother with a fierce look. Are you serious? You wrecked my car, and then what? Give it back now. Calm down, Ethan. How can I stay calm? You're paying for the repairs, got it? That's impossible. I've already sold the car. Sold it? That's not possible. The car is in my name. I found a dealer who said they'd buy any car. They said I could even sell it on behalf of someone else. So I sold it for $4,000. $4,000? The luxury car my husband bought would easily go for hundreds of thousands, even if sold now. My mother-in-law got tricked by some shady dealer who didn't know the car's value and got ripped off. When my husband found out, he was furious and yelled at his mom, like never before. You've got to be kidding me. Do you realize how much that car meant to me? I'm sorry, Ethan. I'll give you back the $4,000, so please forgive me. $4,000 isn't even close to enough. Get out. My husband forcefully kicked his mother out and locked the door. He turned to me defeated and muttered, I never thought Mom could cause so much trouble. I'm sorry for not supporting you earlier. Finally, you understand. Don't worry, now that she's gone, I'm over it. Let's move forward happily together. No, we won't. What? Why not? I want a divorce. Instantly, his face turned pale and he clung to me. Wait a second. I already kicked Mom out. Why divorce now? Don't you understand? I'm done with you two. My decision to divorce stands. I don't want to fix things anymore. You've taken your mom's side too many times. It's not fair. You're being too harsh. Harsh? That's rich coming from you. You didn't lift a finger when I needed support. You're so selfish. I hate you just as much as I hate your mother. My feelings won't change, Emma. Calm down. Stop it. This all happened because you chose to live with her. Think about that. I'll never forgive you. What about the car? You got what's coming to you. You deserve it. What? You feel that way? Good. I hope you struggle with double the mortgage and car payments. You deserve the consequences. You'll have to deal with it. You son of a... I left him with those words and grabbed my packed bags. On my way out, I headed straight to City Hall to file for divorce. I deleted all his contact info and cut ties completely. Later, I demanded compensation from my mother-in-law for selling my belongings without my permission. She reluctantly started working. With demands for car payments from her son, she's likely working for the rest of her life. My husband is left with house and car loans, and his life has changed significantly. He no longer goes on stress-relieving drives, spending his days off confined to the house. A hopeless case, both mother and son. Karma's a real thing, serves you right. After all this, I moved to an apartment near my workplace. Now that I'm single again, I have more financial freedom, and life is much more peaceful. Since it's my day off, maybe I'll take a drive to the beach today. This is what freedom feels like. I plan to enjoy my new life to the fullest.